of the more interesting things that I've noticed about Jayce throughout the entire series is that despite the fact that he is one of, like, the heroes or the legends, right? Like, he is one of the core characters from the game. Like, he is a very well-known playable character. He's one of the worst combatants in the entire series. This one's going to be the first in, like, a series of fight scene conversation and analysis of characters' fighting styles or their fighting philosophies. I've covered bits and pieces, like, in other videos, but I want to try and dig a little more into this particular aspect. One more little tidbit about me so that you understand where I'm coming from when I talk about this. I am a member of the Society of American Fight Directors, which is a theatrical combat organization in the United States, and I hold the rank of Advanced Actor Combatant, and I'm currently certified in 6 of 8 weapons. Oh, I might have to renew some of them. Now, mind you, despite this, he probably has one of the higher body counts of the series, except for, like, obviously Ambessa, but, you know, there's a statement to be made there that's somewhat along the lines of those with the least respect for weaponry can do the most damage with it, but that's not really the point of this video. But it's an attentive little detail to point out, especially in the first season, that Jayce would have almost negative combat training and yet has one of the most aggressive weapons. The Mercury Hammer is infinitely stronger than the Atmos Gauntlets because it was designed to be a weapon, whereas the Atmos Gauntlets were designed to do mining work. The difference between Vi and Jayce, though, is that Vi has been fighting and scrapping since she was a child. She's been learning at the hands of an experienced boxer for the majority of her young life, and then went to prison and probably learned a lot more there. But Jayce, on the other hand, has only ever used hammers in the forge, and the way you swing a hammer, yeah, sure, that's kind of universal, but what you're taking out on a piece of metal is not the same as a person trying to come at you. Because of this, the fight down in the Shimmer Factory is one of the best illustrations of this, but also I just have to point out how well illustrated it is, right? The animators did an exceptional job of showing that Jayce is a terrible fighter. Because, I don't know if you all have caught this over the course of the series, Jayce is right-handed, right? When he picks up a small hammer, he holds it in his right hand. When he's looking at things, he looks at it with his right hand, right? He is a right-handed character. At the start of the Shimmer Factory, he is holding the Mercury Hammer as though he were a lefty. And it's because he doesn't understand how a two-handed war hammer would work in combat terms, right? He's right-handed, so he's got the bottom grip of his right hand, and he cradles it in the top hand in his left, right? But that's stronger if you are left-handed. This is one of the reasons he spends the beginning of that fight completely on the back foot, because he is totally unbalanced. He has no fighting experience to begin with, but his weapon also won't move the way he wants it to. How is it that he even survives that fight? Well, if there's one thing he does understand, it is hammers, and it is that there is a mass at the end of a long staff, and he's got to get momentum for it. So what does he do? A tactically unsound full 180 spin into a crack, and it just, that's where he finally buys himself a little space. It is only after this that he finally swaps over into the proper hand, and suddenly it's a lot easier for him to do shorter maneuvers, and he's not under so much pressure. But the fact that it's a very slight blow that absolutely destroys that one Chemtank's knee, I think it is, like we see like the illustration of the bones shattering, tells you just how strong the Mercury Hammer is on its own. And we can sort of interpret from this, Jayce is relying heavily on his weapon to do the work of the fight for him. One other fun thing about Jayce and his weapon, for all of the lead up to the final confrontation with Victor and the Noxians, did you notice that Jayce only swings his hammer once in the entire fight? And there's, like, you know, a lot of narrative reason for this, but I do think it's interesting that, you know, Jayce powers down the Hex Gate, like, right as the battle is going on. He doesn't start, like, a day before. Like, they had time to power down the Hex Gates the way he's doing it long before the Noxians ever came back in, right? I've had to wonder, ever since, like, Season 1 with the Shimmer Factory and what happens to Rennie's son from the Mercury Hammer, if he just ends up basically trying as hard as he can to never wield his weapon again. Because even though he's already had a confrontation with one of the Hex-cursed bots, and it's like, you know, he has the knowledge of what it is to fight one of those things, and he has a weapon that isn't completely useless against it, right? The Mercury Hammer is one of the more powerful weapons in the entire series. Instead, he takes himself as a piece off the board and puts himself down at the Hex core itself. You could argue, right, like, last line of defense, but nobody expected Victor to go straight there. They all thought Victor was in the cocoon. Like, that was what they understood as part of the strategy. So they took one of their most powerful weapons off the field. Why? I put forward that for the same reason that Silco never carries a weapon in his hands, that Jayce, following the events and the horror that haunts him, whether or not he expresses it greatly, he doesn't want to ever wield his weapon again. The one swing he takes against Victor as they're sailing up to the roof of the Hex Gate, I don't know, like, it doesn't feel motivated with destruction. It's like as they're rocketing up, he's coming from the top down with that arcing swing. He's trying to push Victor back down. Like, I mean, yes, he would do a ton of damage if he hit, and that was the intention, but his intention was to push Victor back down and not get him up to the top. Even as they're rocketing upward and Victor has him by the throat after that, like, he doesn't swing the hammer again. He could try to do something. He could try to do anything, but he doesn't. He kind of just lets himself get carried. This could also play back into Jayce doesn't have combat experience and doesn't really know how to fight. I think that much in the same way that Victor honestly did not want to commit violence during his attempt to get a hold of the wild rune, I think Jayce also didn't want to put violence back into the world. It was bad enough that he made weapons that other people were using.